Hey everyone, Jen here in my kitchen. Today I think is a very special session. I'm giving you the recipe for my great-grandmother's my Italian great-grandmother's tomato sauce. Today we're making meatballs and spaghetti and meatballs. But I'm going to give you the recipe for this really delicious tomato sauce that I think is pretty simple, but it's the one I always make, and also a really good recipe for meatballs. I'll show you how to cook the noodles. So we're going to get started on our sauce. The longer you can simmer your sauce with the meatballs, the better. Of course, it's going to taste a lot better, but this whole meal should come together within about an hour, but longer if you have longer to let the sauce simmer away. So we're going to heat up a pot with a good glug of olive oil in the bottom. You want probably 3 tablespoons of oil in there. So my burner is just on medium low. So while that's heating, you can chop up your garlic. So my grandmother's recipe was, you'd heat up the olive oil and you'd heat up the garlic in the olive oil and cook it until it was just like lightly golden, the garlic. But I like a little bit more of a garlicky flavor. So depending on how garlicky you like your sauce, you can chop it up real fine and throw in a few cloves of garlic if you like, or you can just smash a clove or two and just like let it simmer in the sauce. And then the flavor will get into the sauce a bit. Or you can scoop them out before you add the rest of the ingredients, but I'll show you. I've got three cloves of garlic here, and I'm just gonna smash them with the side of my knife and put them in the oil, just to start bringing the flavor out, so the flavor of the garlic gets into the oil. Okay, the next important thing in this recipe, I think, is celery leaves. So usually find the tender stalks of celery on the inside of this, and you can throw in just the leaves like this and let that sizzle. So whenever I am using celery and I just want the stalks, I always save the leaves and I throw them into a little baggie and put them in the freezer for when I know I'm making my tomato sauce. And then you want to cook your spices a little bit. We have dried basil, a bay leaf, and some chili powder. Just a pinch of chili powder. Add that into the oil, give that a quick stir, and then we're going to add a couple tablespoons of tomato paste. And you want to cook your tomato paste. You cook your tomato paste a bit before you add your tomatoes. So these are just some stewed tomatoes. And kind of try and dissolve that tomato paste. Okay, and then we'll add a bit of water. So we'll bring the sauce up to a boil, And while that is heating up, we'll make our meatballs. Okay, so first thing we do with our meatballs, I'm going to use half of this onion. Depending on the size of your onion, really just one small onion is probably enough. But instead of chopping it up and getting big bites of onion, we're going to grate this into the bowl that we're mixing our meat into. And then that way, all of the juices of the onion mix into the meat mixture and everything's kind of oniony and evenly seasoned. So I've just left the core bit on this part and I'm going to just grate right into the bowl that I'm going to mix everything into. You can see we've got nicely finely grated onion and lots of juice that came out. That'll all get mixed in. And we're using a combination of medium ground beef because it's very flavorful, has a nice amount of fat. And I was going to do pork and I'm going to give you guys pork, but I actually have ground chicken. So whatever you have or whatever is on sale or whatever, I like to combine a couple different types of meat, but if you just had ground beef, that's okay too. And then maybe a clove or two of garlic. You can mince this up really well, or you can, if you have big enough cloves of garlic, you can use the grater for it. And then Parmesan cheese, or I have pecorino, which is like a dry sheep's milk cheese. Either way, something that you would put on your pasta. Just going to grate some of that into our meatballs as well. So about a quarter of a cup. And some salt and pepper. Next we have about a quarter of a cup of breadcrumbs. So breadcrumbs aren't totally necessary if you're gluten-free or just want to cut down on carbs. It's really there as like, kind of makes the meatballs a little bit more moist and kind of lighter. It helps them stretch a little bit farther, but they're really not necessary to bind them together. Same with the egg. I always put in an egg, but it's also not necessary. You can get your meatballs to stick together without that. So now we're gonna get our hands in there once again, mix it up really well. Get those sounds, get that audio bite. Okay, once you're happy with that mixture and it's nice and homogeneous, then you can make your meatballs. So this, it doesn't really matter how big your meatballs are. Just make sure they're all about the same size because you want them all to kind of cook at the same rate. And I'm going to set them onto a plate until I'm ready. This is quite a big batch, so you might have to either cook your meatballs in separate batches. So you do one pan and then put them in the sauce, or do another, or if it's too much for yourself or for your family, I like to make up all of the meatballs all at once and put them on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. Put them in the freezer like this, raw, and then put them into a Ziploc bag once they're frozen, but keep them separate so that they don't stick together. And then you can pull them out whenever you want to make them, and then you'll proceed from the step where you sear the outsides, get them nice and golden, and then you put them in the sauce to continue cooking all the way through. Okay, so heat up your pan with a little bit of cooking oil. I have a combination of my bacon fat and some olive oil. Make sure it's hot enough, and then you'll just sear the outside of your meatballs. Make sure they're well spaced so that you can flip them and they don't stick together. So you'll know that your meatballs are done enough on the bottom is when you can kind of easily remove them from the bottom of the pan and there's not pieces of them sticking. Flip them over and you'll see like a bit of a golden edge, and then you want the same thing on the other side. And these meatballs don't need to be cooked all the way through because we're going to continue cooking them in the tomato sauce. Okay, so once your meatballs are nice and golden on both sides, then we can put them into the tomato sauce. Just gently drop them in, or if you're not afraid of all of this fat in the pan, you can pour the whole thing in, and I will not judge you. So spread them out and let them sit in this sauce that's very gently simmering. So you just want to see like a few little bubbles. You don't want it to be a full-on boil. Just kind of set them in the sauce and then let them simmer. If you're going to let them simmer for a while, like an hour or more, then put a lid on top so that not a whole lot of water evaporates, and then just check every 25 minutes or so. Pasta sauce is simmering away. Now I've got a pot full of water ready to come to a boil and add my pasta. My pasta is an egg noodle that's going to take maybe 5 minutes, but I want to just stress to you that the most important part of this whole process isn't following the instructions on the package, but to taste your water. And when you taste your water, once you've added salt, and you'll probably be adding much more salt than you expected to. You taste it, and it has to taste good. Like you want it to taste like a nice, almost like a soup broth. So it tastes salty, but not too salty. So that's so that your pasta that you cook in this water actually absorbs some salt and tastes good and not just bland, and then you need all of the flavor in your sauce. So I hope that's a good tip. But anyways, it is a whole lot more salt than you expect, and use good salt. If you have sea salt or kosher salt, use that. Don't use table salt, the iodized stuff. It's not going to taste as nice. So if you have sea salt, use that. Really, really salt your water. Taste it, and it should taste like I said, tasty. Okay, well, after you cooked your pasta, drain it, and then just a scoop of sauce with some meatballs, Parmesan cheese or whatever on top of that, maybe some chili flakes, maybe some fresh cracked pepper, and that's it. I hope you enjoy this very special recipe of mine. We'll see you soon.